Is Kansas State truly on the rebound after their last win, or was that an aberration?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Locked On Crossover with Locked On the Portal and Locked On Kansas State. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making both Locked On Kansas State and Locked On the Portal a part of your day each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are brought to you today by Mazda. Like players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. We're going to be talking about the unique scenario that Kansas State is in, both with Chris Klieman, potentially some of their players, the big game they got this weekend with Baylor, and how does all the things that are going on right now impact the recruiting trail for K-State? For me, it's going to be a lot of fun, but it's even better now that I have Kristen Rauh with me. Look, man, this is a weird week for you, I'm sure. Like, they played better. But do you buy it 100%?
100% is a strong word to say. It's a
That's
strong number that we're going at here. But I will say, since the last time we spoke, I do feel a lot better because of the energy they brought coming out of the bye week. And there was a lot of doom and gloom when we talked the last time because it felt like the season was already in the dumps. Now you kind of dig back in after winning by 2 scores against an undefeated UCF. And I am well aware that this UCF team was overachieving, kind of finding themselves regressing back to the mean. I think Scott Frost is going to get that team back to where they need to be, kind of where Scott Frost was in tenure 1 with UCF, just not right now. So I think it made a lot of sense that we took care of business in Manhattan on Saturday. The things that went right is what gives me excited because Avery Johnson started using his legs. Dylan Edwards returned, and he showed that when he's the starting running back on this roster, he's electric, he's dynamic, he's everything we expected to be. And that Rate Bowl game against Rutgers wasn't just a one-time thing. It's going to be when he is running back 1, he is showing that he can be that guy that not only just fills the shoes of DJ Giddens, but can be even more explosive than what you had last year in the backfield as well. So still a couple concerns, let up a lot of explosive plays. We can talk about that as well on this show, but overall, 100% absolutely not.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, they won, they played better defense, they were more consistent, they didn't turn the ball over. Like, all those little things that you need to do to win were there, but UCF is not that good. We knew that even though they played pretty well for what they have early in the season. It's still UCF, and that's a bottom 5 team in the Big 12.
That's what we predicted. Yeah.
So they are who we thought they are. With that being stated, there's no way of avoiding this. We might as well jump in. Did that at least cool off the hot seat for Chris Klieman a little bit? Because, that start, man, was rough. You can't get beat by, military account like that. That's just not going to fly. What is the fan base saying about that situation? Because that really impacts the rest of what's going on with K-State and this show, for that matter.
Yeah, I think that it's cooled off, but I don't think that the flames are out by any means. I think the embers are still warm. I think there's still some things around when you're talking about Chris Klieman, especially if you have this loss against Baylor. I'm not sure actually how much that changes because it's still a tough team against Baylor, but really your season's over if you pick up that second loss in the Big 12 so early in the season. I just don't know if it's the same feeling, going 1-3 into the bye week and that only win you have is a last second drive against an FCS school. That's why it felt so doom and gloom. But the bye week showed that they can make the needed adjustments. And that was actually a big question for Chris Klieman because heading into this past week, he had a sub 500 record of winning after the bye week since being the head coach at Kansas State. So that's now up to 500 now. He got the 500 after the win against UCF, but it showed that even though he had his worst start as a tenure at Kansas State at 1-3, they can reset and move forward. They didn't make any changes at the coordinator position, especially when you're looking at offensive coordinator Matt Wells. And maybe that turned out to be a good thing because they returned Dylan Edwards. He got the opportunity to show that he can perform with Dylan Edwards, their star running back, in the backfield. They did some interesting things, bringing in quarterback 2 Blake Barnett as a Wildcat situation as well. The reason they did that is because they didn't know if Dylan Edwards is going to be ready. So they installed that in the bye week. They said, let's run it anyways. But I think it was the best week for Matt Wells since he's been the offensive coordinator at Kansas State. We'll see if he can continue that and move forward against Baylor on Saturday. Because if he can, then the entire narrative changes, Brian.
Well, Avery didn't look comfortable earlier this year. Looks like he's slowly, for lack of a better term, I know that's used all the time, turning the corner. But
yeah,
hey,
you know what I think about when I think of Avery Johnson, how you compare him to the first half of the year, first quarter of the year to what we saw on Saturday. It felt like he was trying to be, for the lack of a better term, this is what I keep using, the perfect quarterback. He was trying to look to roll out to the corners. He was trying to find himself always for a pass. If there was an opening where he could scramble for 4 or 5 yards and make that situation better, he wouldn't do it. Instead, he would decide to look downfield, look for a big play, and that would never work out for the most part. 10% of the time he might get lucky, but he would make ill-advised throws, off-balance throws. He was lucky that he only has 1 interception on the season because of some of those timings that he didn't make. And then he was trusting his wide receivers who have 10 drops on the season way too much. He needed to go back to the point to where he was running the football more. The coaches asked him to do that this past week, and we got that right away. Right from the first drive, he had a 25-yard scramble, and it felt different. It felt like Kansas State football, all the stuff we expected, and I think that's where that upside and that optimistic view still sits as we head into Waco on Saturday.
Well, if they do that, I mean, outside of just putting him in harm's way a little bit more, I think it's their best path. And it's probably the best path for Chris Klieman to stay employed in Manhattan, Kansas. I don't think Avery is anywhere near where he needs to on understanding progressions to be a pocket quarterback. I don't think he's in the stratosphere, but he's only a third-year player. That's pretty typical. If you look around college football right now, if you look at the top rankings, 90% of the guys that are at the top are juniors, a few, then seniors, fifth-year seniors, and some of those sixth-year seniors. This is the last year of that from the COVID. Experience at quarterback is massive. So he's par for the course, but he has glimpses. This is what he should be for the third year out of high school. With that being stated, what do you think Klieman and the offense and everything need to show this week to get it to the point where you, Christian, and anybody else that really follows the team would be all in on them not just winning the game, like there's got to be some aesthetics to it. Like you can't win 13-10 at a 7 turnover kind of game. You need to show something. Like, what is it you need to see for you to be like, you know what? They're going to be pretty good. They may not end up in the Big 12 title game, but they're pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, for the lack of, explaining it any better, seeing the exact same thing we saw on Saturday, but against a better defense in Baylor. And I don't know if it's that much of a better defense. That is definitely the weak spot of the Bears program. Their offense is amazing. Sawyer Robertson is absolutely insane. And you're going to have to be in a shootout with him. I think you're going to have to go score for score in this football game. And I wouldn't be surprised if both teams find themselves in the high 30s or even 40s when it's all said and done. I think you have to find yourself with that offensive explosiveness yet again, that high energy yet again, where you're cheering for every big win on the sidelines. You're getting sideline warnings. It's such that kind of conversation when it comes to Kansas State. The energy needs to stay high, especially since you're going on the road against Waco, a very tough environment. With the exception of the last time they went, they've actually had some decent history there. So you got to find a way to do good in Waco with high energy. And then, of course, starts with Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards. There is some reports, and we'll see what happens on Saturday, that Jace Brown and Jared Bradley will not be ready to go. So if that's the case, he'll have 2 of his big wide receivers out for this game as well. If he can overcome that and stay close to this game or even find a way to win it, then to me, Avery Johnson has definitely cleared that path, that hole, that floor, or whatever we want to talk about, of being in that quarterback shouldn't be discussed as being one of the best quarterbacks for Kansas State in a very long time.
Yeah. They've had some good players, but not really anybody that has the athleticism and overall arm talent that Avery has. I think his combination is very, very, very unique. So, losing Losing that combo at receiver, though, that would be really hard to overcome against Baylor's offense. That's tough, man.
Yeah.
So good luck to them on that. But when we come back, I want to talk about the opportunity. If they can do it, obviously it's going to be more difficult if those receivers are out. Can they get over this hump, keep everything together? Otherwise, I kind of wonder about the transfer portal, how that's going to go. That is next here on this crossover, Locked On Portal and Kansas State. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This show is also brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP, who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For K-State, Avery Johnson. He honestly started to look better. The offense was more consistent for the Wildcats, and they won. They needed that victory very, very badly. And there were moments that things could have went south. They had the leadership and the playmaking ability, and Avery Johnson delivered for them. And just like Avery Johnson delivered for Kansas State, DoorDash delivers for your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. Save every Saturday with your order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo code GOOD through November the 18th. Thank you once again for making Locked On the Portal and Locked On Kansas State a part of your day each and every day. Christian, if things went south, this is just the nature of the business. If for whatever reason, and again, if both those receivers are out, that's a whole nother conundrum. I do not like the odds of winning in Waco if both of those guys do not dress. That's
sure.
Bad news. I'll just go ahead and say it. For those who don't know, they are proposing, and it's been voted upon, that there will only be one portal, and that'll be the winter window. Mm-hmm. The winter window being the only one, the money for specific positions, offensive tackle, defensive tackle, and guess what? Quarterback will be insane. You know who's going to get a lot of phone calls? Avery Johnson, because he's on a team that right now just isn't that good. At least they're just a roller coaster. You don't know what you're going to get game to game. The money for him this offseason is going to be bananas. I see him as the most likely guy right now that could get in the portal if things went sideways, because it's just not working out. Maybe it does turn around. We don't know. They got a half dozen games left. It's plausible. And I've got a few games or a few things I can show on my screen here just to pull them up. But there are so many different people that they can go and look at. Big time players around the country. That's one thing. I don't know where I put that darn thing, but anyway, I think that you're going to see a lot of different guys get phone calls, but how many are likely to leave? I think Avery will be the first phone call for a whole bunch of people. I really do.
And to be honest, he probably was the first phone call by a lot of people even last year. We heard him being in the rumor mill when it came to Tennessee, and he decided to stay. You got to remember, he's an in-state kid. He does enjoy being in the Kansas State and Manhattan area. But look, if they decide to make a coaching change, or if they decide to stick around with Chris Klieman and the coaching staff and Matt Wells, and he doesn't believe that that's the right way for him to develop into an NFL-ready quarterback, because, look, that potential is still on the table for Avery Johnson without question, then, yeah, I would expect him to maybe entertain the transfer portal. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Now, this is all if the season goes south, and because you're already at 2-3 on the season, I'm starting to stop looking at the overall record, although that's just something to move forward as a Kansas State host here, and focus on the 1-1 in the Big 12. And the reason that I'm doing that is because when you think of being 1-1 in the Big 12, that is really your only path for success the rest of the way. Your only path for success the rest of the way is finding yourself potentially get to Arlington. You're not going to be an at-large bid after losing to Army, and if your best case being a 9-3 football team. If Alabama couldn't win and make it to the college football playoffs at 9-3, then Kansas State losing to Army is definitely not going to do it. So your only chance at making that happen would to be basically run the table, maybe have one more loss in conference, get the 7-2, get lucky with a couple tiebreakers, find yourself in Arlington, and then sneak through and win that championship game, the fight for Dr. Pepper in Arlington to get yourself the college football playoffs. That is still on the table. And that's crazy to think about because of how crazy and how bad the first quarter of this season was. But statistically, it is on the table. And for the longest time in the bye week, I kept using this phrase and I kept saying statistically, yes, it's on the table, but realistically, no. Now I'm like, statistically, yes, but realistically, maybe. That win against UCF was so huge for confidence. And again, I'm well aware that that was probably, with the exception of the Oklahoma State game later on in the season in Stillwater, I might add, is probably the easiest game on the schedule was the UCF game. You look at the rest of the stuff on the schedule, you got Texas Tech, you got Utah, you have Kansas in Lawrence, and then, of course, you're playing Baylor this week, and then TCU as well. If you can't get through Baylor, I don't see you running the table and getting yourself the 7-2 on the season. So when you're talking about the transfer portal, if they find themselves maybe out of a bowl game, especially, I could see Avery potentially putting his name in the hat, finding himself maybe in the Big Ten or the SEC next season.
And it goes for the same thing with several of the other guys. Edwards and a bunch of other players will get offers too. Yeah. I don't know how many guys will be back next year anyway, but in today's era,
retention was a huge thing last year, Brian. And I don't know and I don't know if they sold it saying this year will be better. I don't know how they sold this for the retention, but the retention was huge. The only player they lost that really had a ton of value from last season, Carter Willis from that went to Washington, offensive lineman, and then Trey Spivey went to Arizona, a wide receiver. Other than that, they kept Jace Brown, they kept Dylan Edwards, they kept Avery Johnson, they kept a lot of the really big players that they needed to. I don't know how they sold it. If that's how they sold it, though, we're saying this year will be better, and then all of a sudden you're a 5-7 football team. I don't think the retention model is going to work again.
That's what I'm saying. The next 2 weeks are going to decide how the next 3 years at Kansas State are going to go. Legitimately.
Great point.
Because your coaching staff might change. Of course, anytime that happens, you're going to have an upheaval with your roster, your assistants, possibly the AD. Like there's all kinds of things that go with that. And I don't follow K-State close enough. Is the AD liked, respected, going to be around, or?
He's older, and I think he is tied to Chris Klieman, if that's just my personal opinion. My guess is that even if they do have a very unsuccessful season, there's not going to be an in-season firing. It's going to be an ask Chris Klieman, since you brought us a Big 12 championship in 2022, you're going to ask him to retire. And then at the end of the season, you're going to begin a coaching search. If that's the case, that's a dreadful result for the people who are on the roster right now, especially Avery Johnson, if there's only one transfer portal window, because you won't know who your coach is for the future, and he's going to test himself. Now, if they decide to make changes initially in the middle of the season, and then they went after, I don't know, let's just say, for example, offensive coordinator at Texas A&M, Colin Klein, former Kansas State quarterback, I think Avery Johnson might think about sticking around.
Well, that's what I mean. There's so many little pieces to this. It'd be a lot easier to sell Klein to him, who's a K-State guy and all that stuff. And he's had success this year. I don't think the quarterback, Marcel Reed, is great, but at least they got explosive players and they get the ball out quick for him. I don't think he's as talented as Avery, but they've got more weapons than Avery does, and that's
Agreed.
Not close. So I don't know. It'll be interesting because K-State, I don't know what their NIL is, but it's not Tennessee. It's not Miami. It's not Oregon. It's not Texas Tech. And all these things play into it. How much are you loyal to your state? Like this stuff it's just endless. But I do cover the Portal podcast. This is what it's about, man. Like we're on that verge in about 2 weeks, Christian. Yeah. I'm going to start. I may not be able to announce them. I'm going to get text messages that I'm going to go, oh, that's going to start happening. Because guys are making decisions now on whether or not they want to leave at the end of this season, how much they even want to play at that school because they don't want to get hurt before they go into the portal. Like this is just how it works. It's not fair, but it's more of an NFL model now because of how the portal is and the immediate eligibility. You can't get hurt.
Right.
You're going to
100%.
see. It's amazing how guys in November are all going to have sprained ankles.
I know we're talking Kansas State here, but perfect example is that Oregon running back, Malachi Hughes, deciding to ask for a red shirt after transferring from Tulane over to Oregon. and deciding to redshirt because he has to try and find his NFL draft stock. You could see players like Dylan Edwards, Avery Johnson, Jace Brown, maybe some of these other big defenders on Kansas State that still have eligibility decide to take that route if this season goes down the drain. We're seeing it a max exodus at Oklahoma State as well. Kansas State isn't out of the loop if this season goes down the drain, without question.
I mean, some of these guys could end up at Texas Tech or Michigan or anywhere else. It is really wild.
5 of those names that decommitted from Oklahoma State did have offers from Kansas State. Just saying out loud.
Well, I mean, that's technically an option, but which coach will be recruiting them is
a good point. That's a good point.
It's so hard. Speaking of recruiting, that is the next topic here on this crossover at Locked On the Portal and Locked On Kansas State. Today's show is also brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's the most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're into running, lifting, or just cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. You're going to love how Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the different weights that you need, and corrects your form every time for each rep being safer and smarter. Let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. All right. The ugly question in the room. How do you recruit to Kansas State when all this stuff is going on? Take it away, Christian. Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough. And I think it's a lot easier. Again, we're making hypotheticals here. I know that I'm not an SEC show here, but I am a Big 12 show. We can pretend to be hypotheticals. I will say this. I don't know exactly how you can recruit. And you mentioned that there's going to, if this next 2 weeks go astray, the next 3 years is going to be a lot different for Kansas State. The whole 8-9 wins over the last 4 or 5 years is not going to be a thing for a couple seasons. Unless, and I truly believe this, unless they get a hometown guy like Colin Klein, who has that roots in Manhattan, that can sell it and say, there's a reason that I came back. I've had this success at Texas A&M, but I know the roots in Manhattan and can find a way to sell that to the in-state kids. I think that is the only route you take. If that is the case, though, I think you have to have a new athletic director. I don't know if they go that far. So it'll be a really interesting thing if they do that. But you're also talking at the same exact time, if this is the case, again, another hypothetical, if they decide to move on from Chris Klieman, this is the same exact time that the Kansas Jayhawks are putting in $300 million into their new stadium, and they're adding an annuity when it comes to adding player revenue to make sure they can recruit in a better spot and be higher in the Big 12. And they're going to have a focus, not just on a national level, but at in-state kids. So not a great time for the Kansas State program to be going downward, but it looks that's where it's heading.
That's one of the reasons I bring it up. Like Iowa State is up. Kansas is up. Oklahoma State, they're lucky. They're maybe the worst program in the conference right now. I can't imagine anybody being worse. It's not good when those teams are up and you're down. It's hard enough to get the Dallas kids, and that's your main. Like you're trying to get some Dallas kids, trying to get some Houston kids, etc. You got to recruit Texas. When those schools are up, that's just added fodder for you to go through beyond Texas Tech, which is probably the biggest pain. Arizona State, Houston, and everybody else that recruits. Baylor's got deep pockets, SMU, etc. That's rough. Do you think, based on at least how they played, have any of the freshmen made a dent this year? Is that something they can sell, or is it more just upperclassmen and it's still just not worked?
No, there's been some freshmen that have stepped up. Lincoln Cure is the easiest one to pay attention to. He got his first reception against UCF. He made a trick play throw where he actually threw an interception before a reception. So that's actually kind of funny as a tight end. But the fact that they trust him to do that type of stuff, they're giving the ability to do so. And then on the defensive side, Logan Bartley has been outstanding. I mean, NFL talent caliber guy already as a true freshman. Very excited to see him. I would not be surprised if they make a coaching change that he decides to find himself in the state of Texas for a team, or maybe Oklahoma or Oklahoma State. I'm very nervous about keeping him around. That's one of the players that I think you got to throw everything you have at if changes do arise, because I do think Logan Bartley is going to be a guy that has a Topps trading card with an NFL team on it next to it in about 4 or 5 years. Regardless, though, it's really tough, Brian. It's really tough to think about this, of course, because we haven't had to think about this for a very long time when it comes to recruiting. In the Bill Snyder years, never was a problem. Chris Klieman filled those shoes pretty well, building up the recruiting. He already had that Midwest trail, and then they added the state of Texas into the pipeline when it comes to Chris Klieman, and they did a really good job this year at doing that. They brought in one of the best transfer portal classes in a very long time, and the top prospect according to 24/7 in the history of the program in Lincoln Cure. If the season goes downhill, and it could in the next couple of weeks with Baylor, TCU, Texas Tech on the schedule, then we might see some decommitments after thinking that we got some wins over these other programs in the state of Texas, and then things start to change. What happens with a guy like Keegan Collins? What happens with a guy like Miles Teodecki? A lot of interesting players that could be up for grabs again if there is some crazy coaching changes, or they just decide that this isn't a program they think they can succeed in because they don't see a future. Either way, that's not a good feeling to be at if you're a Kansas State fan.
That's why the next 2 weeks are so important. You
It's
can
huge.
avoid a lot of this. They have to win at least one of the two. And on top of it, just to be clear, there can't be any 38-10 game.
Yeah, they have to win at least one of the two, and I mean the other one has to be like the other losses,
A field goal
where
or
they're
something
within a
like that.
score. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, because perception is such an important part of recruits. Like, I'm around them a lot. Today's kids, man, it is minute to minute. And K-State's not trended in the right direction that much until they beat UCF and they played better. But UCF doesn't hold any cachet, not with recruits anyway.
Yeah, Baylor and TCU will move the needle, in my opinion.
Yeah, because those are Dallas area programs that matters. So absolutely. All right, Christian, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Locked On Kansas State, always bringing you Kansas State Wildcats coverage like no one else every single day. We're going to do a live reaction on Saturday after the game, 11 o'clock Central Time, ESPN Plus, Baylor, Kansas State. Crazy if that game's on ESPN Plus, if I was going to be the Big 12 game of the year, but that's just how this season has rolled out to be. But I'll be on there, and you can find it anywhere you listen to audio and on YouTube.
Yeah, same thing for the Portal Podcast. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. It's a lot of fun. We're going to be talking, hopefully not on Christian's expense, but about a lot of Portal guys soon. Could be some K-State guys. I don't know for sure, but the Portal is going to be crazy very, very soon. There's going to be a lot of discussion. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your pods. Thank you very much. We will see you again soon.